Welcome to the New Testament Church of God in Erdington, also known as New Life Erdington. We are a family-friendly church situated in Goosemore Lane, and we're really pleased that you've decided to join us online today. Our prayer is that you will be encouraged, strengthened and comforted as we share the love of Jesus with you. Don't forget to leave your comments below, and if you have any questions, a need for assistance or prayer, then you can leave your request in the comments or contact us in the details you see at the bottom of your screen. New Life Erdington. Together we have faith.
Our Father, who art in heaven, hallowed be thy name. Thy kingdom come, thy will be done, on earth as it is in heaven.
Give us this day our daily bread. Forgive us our sins, as we forgive those who sin against us.
And lead us not into temptation, but deliver us from evil.
For thine is the kingdom, the power and the glory, forever and ever. Amen.
Amen. Amen.
Amen.
Again, the kingdom of heaven can be illustrated by the story of a man going on a long trip. He called together his servants and entrusted his money to them while he was gone. He gave 5 bags of silver to one, 2 bags of silver to another, and 1 bag of silver to the last, dividing it in proportion to their abilities. He then left on his trip. The servant who received the 5 bags of silver began to invest the money and earned 5 more. The servant with 2 bags of silver also went to work and earned 2 more. But the servant who received the 1 bag of silver dug a hole in the ground and hid the master's money.
I tell you what, I'm going to get straight into it today, and because I just want to, if possible, just take about 10 minutes of your time just to speak to you today about one of the parables that Jesus spoke. Now, the scripture that I've chosen to speak to you about can be taken from Matthew 25, and you can read about it from verse 14 onwards to verse 30. The title of my short sermon, so to speak, that I'm going to speak to you about today is it's just simply titled, "Don't Bury Your Blessing, Invest in Your Blessing." So if we look at the scripture today, and a small portion I believe was read out to you, it's taken from one of the parables of the kingdom of heaven, what Jesus spoke to his disciples and followers about. Now, these parables were said to them, for specific reasons, and this particular parable was all about investing in the talents and the gifts that God has actually given us. So it prompts me just to ask myself, and if you would permit me to ask you as well a few questions when we read this parable. So to summarize what happened first, so in this parable, Jesus is speaking to his disciples, and he says the kingdom of heaven is likened. So he's given a direct comparison to what God is like, and to what the kingdom of heaven would be like. And he says the kingdom of heaven is like a master who's going on a long journey, and he entrusts a proportion of his wealth into his servants. Now, there's 3 servants, and the first servant, he goes to the servant and he says, "I want to leave you with 5 talents." Now, talents in terms of the scripture was referring to a particular amount of money. However, we could refer to talents as gifts or anything that God gives us, really. So the first servant, he actually gave 5, and he says, "Well, I'm going away, you take care and look after these 5. The second servant, because this was a wise employer, master, he gave the second servant 2, because he managed managed his servants in line with their abilities. So he said, "You look after these 2, and I'm going away, and we'll speak when I get back." And the third and final servant, he gave 1 talent, and he said, "Here's 1 talent, or 1 portion of my wealth. Look after it wisely, and we'll talk when we get back." Now, when the master came back, he went to his first servant and says, "Well, what did you do with the talents I gave you?" And the servant says, good news, boss. You gave me 5, and I tell you what, I invested them 5, and I managed to get another 5, so you've got 10. The master or employer says, "Well done, you're good and faithful servant. Because you've been faithful in this, you can share in this," and he actually blessed him with more wealth. Similar to the second servant, who had 2, was asked the same question, and he says, "Well, I've got 2 more." So the master said, "Well done, good and faithful servant. You've been faithful in some things, so I'm going to increase you in other things." Now, the third servant, he called him and he says, well, what did you do with the talent that I give you, the one talent? And he says, you know, boss, I know how you stay, I know what you like, you know, you don't want nothing to happen to your things, so I just took what you gave me and I buried it into the ground. Now that was a big problem, and you know, when you read the scripture, the master was very upset, very upset with his servant. So the questions that come out of this is, what has God invested in you, or invested in me? What has God given us? What talents has God given us? Secondly, what are we doing with them talents? How are we investing them? How are we blessing others? How are we getting some increase? And then thirdly, is there anything that we're burying and not investing in? And the 3 points I want to just leave with you today, firstly, is don't hold on to the blessings that God has given you. So God will have blessed us all in different ways. He would have blessed you in different ways. He'd have blessed me with different talents, which are different to what he's given to you. I think it's important that we don't hold on to them, and that we use what God's given us, you know, and that isn't just in a church environment or anything. It can be applied to anything, you know. Use what God's given you in order to get increase. Use the wisdom he's giving you in the mind. That could be a talent. You could be clever in certain ways, you know. Use it, invest it. You know, there's a difference between investing and burying, and that's one of the things I want to talk to you about today. Investing is, for example, you may invest in your education. So invest involves putting in something with the expectancy of getting a return back. So you may have invested in your education, so you would have invested your time, you'd have invested effort, you know, you may even have invested your money into your education, but the key is, what are you going to get in return? Or what are you hoping for to get in return? So always look to invest what God's given you. Secondly, when God gives us a talent, it can feel like a burden if not invested. Now this is very true. I believe it was true for the people and the servants that were actually in the scripture, because if you think about it, all three of them didn't hold on to what was given to them. They did something with it, whether it was right or it was wrong. They did something with it. That's because if someone gives you something of value, and then you're directly accountable and responsible for that thing, it will be a burden to you unless you can pull it somewhere securely, or you can invest it or do something with it. And it's the same with talents that God has given you. So for example, you'll go through occasions where you might see how something's being done, and you think to yourself, why have they done it like that? Or I could have done it like this, or I can help them with this. Often it's because it's a talent that's been given to you, and you're supposed to be using that talent to do what you need to do. So have a think about that one. And thirdly, don't bury your blessing. So I touched on this before, and the difference between investing and burying. Now, what I like to think of burying, or when you bury something, because we do bury a lot of things. We bury things inside us. We bury our feelings. We bury our emotions. For different reasons. Some of us might even have a big pile of cash under the floorboard somewhere. So sometimes people even bury their money. But people bury things for different reasons, and there's some problems with burying things. And so I'll just explain. I still like to watch some of the old Indiana Jones movies, and or some of the old pirate movies, and in them old movies there's always a treasure map, or there's always some clue that they've got to some treasure that has been buried by someone else. Now, one of the problems with burying things is that when you bury something, the first thing is it can actually degrade. So the quality of what you've buried may not be the same when you actually put it back out. However, take that aside. Because if you went out and you had a metal detector and you went somewhere and it went off, I don't know how many people have used metal detectors, but they can be quite fun. And then you found a pile of Roman coins. Them Roman coins will actually be worth a lot more than when they were worth before. But the point I want to make is that them coins weren't originally intended for you. You might have got that blessing because someone else has buried it. And that's the same if you bury the talents that God's given you. Sometimes, like the third servant in the scripture, if you bury your talent, someone else will get the blessing that was intended for you. So in the scripture, you know, the master actually gave that money to his first servant that actually had 10 already. You know, so he got the increase. The servant who buried it didn't get the increase. So burying, one, you won't actually get any increase. And it's the same in the Indiana Jones movies or the pirate movies. If you notice, the people who buried the treasure, it's not their family, or they're not the ones who actually reap the benefits of them treasure. It's treasure hunters or someone that comes 100, 200, 300 years later will actually get the benefits of that. Sometimes you actually see the person that buried the treasure in the movie. They're a pile of bones in the corner, or they're actually holding onto the treasure chest themselves. Let's make sure that we're not like that, people. You know, let's make sure that we don't hold on to the talents and the treasures that God has given us until we know more. So, on closing, I just want to encourage us. You know, we're coming out of a lockdown situation, and this is an ideal time to reevaluate things, an ideal time to have a look at things. It's an ideal time to have a look at the talents, like in the scripture, that God may have given us. Have a look at some of the things we've been blessed with, and have a think, how can you then reinvest what you already have? That may mean investing, you know, something, a blessing that's been given you. You know, how can you make increase on that? It may be having to think about, well, how can I more utilize the talent that God has given me? How can I bless someone else? How can I help someone else develop the talent that God's given them? Because that's what it's all about, you know. God invests in us, and then he entrusts us to invest in what he's given us so that we get increase. So I'd just like to leave you today just with a final thought. Don't bury your blessings, invest your blessings, and have a lovely week, guys. And thank you very much for listening to me.
Thank you so much for joining with us today. We hope that you have been challenged, you've been encouraged, and also you can feel God's love. We'll be here again, same time, same place next week, bringing to you another message of God's love. But in the meantime, if you need someone to speak to, please reach out to us. Maybe you want some prayer or some encouragement. You can follow us on Instagram and Facebook. You can also visit us on our website, and there we'll keep you up to date with our services, our events, and also our online service. Thank you for joining with us today. Have a lovely and have a blessed week.